Eagles. Eagles.
Welcome in, everybody, to a Thursday edition of Birds 365 with John McMullen and Zander Krause. Hope everyone's having a great day today. Moving into the Eagles bye week this week, so no game coming up for us this weekend. Johnny Mac, how you doing on this Thursday morning as we prep for the early bye week for this team?
Yeah, it's officially the bye week. Yeah, everybody going on vacation. Let's see, get the batteries recharged, self-scout mode. Yeah. And maybe the Phillies will go on a run and everybody will forget about it.
Yeah, maybe that's possible, and it eases the pain right now of what the Eagles have brought us here early in the year. So we'll get into it. John, I got some great topics here in hour number one. We have no guest in hour number one, and we'll have Les Bowen, the great Les Bowen, in hour number two. So looking forward to talking to Les. He always brings he's an opinionated guy, John. I'll put it that way. And I always like to have somebody that has good, bold opinions, whether I agree with them or not. So looking forward to getting to him. And appreciate everybody in the chat this morning. Hope you guys are having a great Thursday. As John said, we're kind of really into the bye now. We're no longer in overreaction or even really reaction mode to what happened on Sunday. I did rewatch some of that game last night. Oh, boy, that was ugly, John. Oh, boy, was that ugly, that football game on Sunday. So Eagles fans, Eagles Nation, Eagles team too, looking to move on from that one as quickly as possible.
Yeah, and you should. I mean, from an offensive standpoint, especially, I can't believe the angst over the offense. I really can't. Sometimes you're up against it from an injury perspective. It's not an excuse, but they were up against it. It's an explanation. Is the difference? Like, if they played that way with those three guys, yeah, oh yeah, by all means, have that angst, but they didn't. And
you know where I think the angst is coming from, John? I think much of the angst in the city is several things, but I think it's isolated on the quarterback because I think there's a little bit of, I don't know if you want to call it PTSD. You're seeing a lot of things where, he was in 22. Every decision Jalen made was right. He had the athletic talent to move around anybody. And we're seeing some similarities to what happened with the last dude that we paid a little bit early. And I think that maybe that's part of the fear and the angst around the offense is that, we're wondering if we made a mistake again. I think it's way too early to declare that, but I'm saying I think that that's living in the minds. It's living in the back of the head. And I think that factors into the angst of the fan base on this offense.
Well, I think it does. What Jalen to me is, and I can only speak to the feedback that I get. I mean, you sort of have two camps who think he can't play at all, or the other camp who, wants to treat him like a delicate flower. No criticisms.
Right, somewhere in the middle is the truth.
Yeah, it's always somewhere in the middle. So, very good player, but there's some issues. You should have some angst, but most of the angst comes with the coaching staff. Let's be honest. I mean, when they play bad, it's Nick's fault. When they play good, hey, see, Kellen took over. And again, it's somewhere in the middle, as it typically is. But it can be explained by, in this particular game, by the circumstances. They came into that game, I believe, and again, a very small sample size, and I encourage everybody to go and check out Jason Kelsey's rant on nerds and statistics. It's phenomenal. He was joking though, but
yeah, I saw that. Everybody
was joking.
Come on, people, take a damn joke.
But yeah, I know it's so ridiculous. But he was joking. But the sentiment behind it is. I say it all the time on this show, but it's part of the industry. It's part of, and by the way, fans are obsessed with, players are obsessed with it because they get paid based on statistics. So, but if you win and you're successful, statistics are going to take care of themselves. And at the end of the day, if you have the right mentality, you don't give a shit about your personal statistics. You're just trying to win games and get to where you want to go. But so it's a small sample size, all that said, and settle down, nerds. But they came in number 2 in total offense. They came in, I believe, number 3 in rushing offense, number 5 in passing offense. And that's 2 games without A.J. Brown. And that were the numbers. Now, again, perfectly meaningless sample size, but they weren't playing poorly offensively. You can nitpick and you can talk about the turnovers, certainly. You can talk about, they're 19th in motion. Nick's taking it away from Kellen Moore. But, Seth Walter doesn't know what he unleashed when he put out those statistics. That to me is the Yanks. And it all comes down to, you don't want to pick on certain players, but, it all comes down to who was playing receiver. And the assumption is, you'll just scheme those guys up. And it's representative of what AJ. It's to me, it's the dumbest thing of the early in the season. I mean, it's obvious what the problem was. It's obvious what the problem was, and the problem goes away after the bye, and hopefully they don't have depth at that position. And if they do have injuries again, it's going to be the same thing. But it's hard to build up depth to an acceptable level, and they don't have it right now at that particular position. So that's number one. Then number 2 is the schedule lightens up dramatically on paper. You got Cleveland. I saw Mike Florio just tweeted they haven't had a 300-yard offensive day the entire season yet.
Only team, right?
Only team. And, Deshaun Watson is not playing well, so that should be helpful to the defense, which has a bunch of problems, and people should be more focused on that. The New York Giants, I mean, right out of the gates, and then if they do happen to go 4-2, everybody's going to be happy again and say, it's great, and not put that context into who they're playing. Now, if they start losing to teams like that, and then the bottom could fall out. Yeah.
Well, I do think you bring up some good points there. I do wonder about your comment earlier in the week, and you've been consistent with this really, I think, the last week and a half or two. Nick Sirianni has the lightning rod, though, and I wonder if like you just said about Jalen, there's a large portion of people who he's the flower, and you don't want to address it, and maybe too much of it falls on the head coach, and that's where I think some of the angst comes from. A couple people in the chat have said, hey, that the angst for me is way bigger on the defensive side.
Oh yeah,
I think there's no doubt about that. I think there's no doubt about that. But John, real quick, I do want to get into something because you brought up something there, and that leads me right into my next topic that I had for you this morning. And you brought up the depth at wide receiver. And when I think about the depth at the wide receiver position, I think about the move that Howie Roseman made just over a month ago. And he sent a 3rd-round pick for Jahan Dotson. And I want to talk about Howie Roseman because, I'm looking at some of the moves that he made for this year. It's not all looking too good for the moves that Howie made this year. And I'm looking for an objective point of view from John, as we always get, on, when is it time to question what Howie did? We talk about players first all the time, right? We talk about the personnel. We talk about having the right guys. Well, the dude who puts the players on the team is Howie. So if you look at some of his recent additions, and we can even talk about draft picks as well, because there's a whole litany of problems in there as well. CJ Gardner-Johnson, 2nd most missed tackles in the NFL right now, most touchdowns allowed in coverage. Bryce Huff, 3 total pressures, 0 sacks, 0 QB hits, and 71 pass rushing attempts. Jahan Dotson, 5 receptions on 8 targets for 25 yards and 129 routes run. Devin White yet to be active. Matt Hennessy, Devontae Parker, Warren Burks, PJ Mustipher, Tyler Hall, and Paris Campbell didn't make the initial roster. Now, I think the 3 players that stick out that are positives on the list are obviously Saquon Barkley, who's been probably the best running back in the league to this point, maybe second to Derrick Henry, who's been on a tear as well, Zach Bond, and Mekhi Becton. That's a big list of misses there. Now, it's early. It's week 4. That's why I'm looking for John McMullen's opinion to talk me off the ledge a little bit. But some years Howie's got magic, John, and some years he doesn't. Right now, I'm wondering if this year we just made the wrong signings and they haven't panned out. And, that's part of the reason you're having issues on defense. By the way, I didn't even get into the defensive draft picks who aren't living up to it either.
Well, I don't when you miss on like Paris Campbell, Tyler Hall, if you want to,
yeah, those are
those.
yeah. I just threw them in to give
and
because
PJ Mustapher, those, even Devin White. I mean, I can't, you can't help people talking themselves into something,
right.
and that's what people did with Devin White. It was a shot. It was a dart at the dartboard, and you hope you can tap into something. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. You go back to the 2017 Super Bowl season, Chris Long, veteran guys, Patrick Robinson. It all worked that year. LeGarrette Blount, it all worked.
Right.
And but those are sort of dart throws, and they don't work more often than they do work. So I think the more substantive ones that you talk, Matt Hennessy, I mean, who cares about Matt Hennessy? But you hope he's healthy. He wasn't healthy, and he was a good player before he got hurt, but evidently he's not going to come back from that. So that's the kind of stuff you're just kind of betting on, and you pay him, near the veteran minimum or a little bit more, and it's just a simple write-off. It's not going to affect you. But the substantive ones, Bryce Huff, Saquon Barkley, and CJ Gardner Johnson. I mean, obviously Saquon's been a tremendous success,
Yeah.
and the other Bryce Huff has been a tremendous failure, and CJ somewhere in between, I would say, but more leaning towards failure. I look, Howie's top 5 general manager before this. He's a top 5 general manager after this. That doesn't mean you get everything right. For the people that go in those wild mood swings and that he's the worst GM in the history of the world when something doesn't work out, and he's the best GM that ever lived, and he's immortal, as you described it off, Barrett. He's a human being. You get personnel stuff right. You get personnel stuff wrong. I would have went a different way. Like I thought the Bryce Huff signing was a good signing. I thought Saquon was uncharacteristic, and they were selling him too hard, but he's lived up to it. So credit to him, at least early in the season. And CJ, I would have went in a different direction. Whether it's you can't get Xavier McKinney, what is it? Sometimes I think we get too caught up, and even NFL GMs get too caught up, and Saquon's a good part of this. Everybody's worried about the money. Well, you can't pay a running back that. Well, you can, and you can if you want to. By and large, you try to make good decisions, and you don't want to pay the average running back or a guy who's in the cluster, so to speak, significant money because it's a devalued position. But if you find somebody who you think is different, yeah, go pay him. And they seem to have made the right decision there. In the case of Huff, I do think they're using him incorrectly. That's part of it. He certainly lost his confidence. I think that's part of it. And that's a big thing for NFL players. You better get started on the reclamation project pretty quickly, or it's, you're going to have to pull the plug. And I just think they made a mistake, as I said. I think everybody was hyper focused on Reed Blankenship because they didn't understand that he was a good player. And the Eagles felt he was a good player, and the Eagles weren't looking to replace him. And they wanted one other safety, and they wanted Xavier McKinney. Then they went to CJ Gardner Johnson, and everybody would talk about ad nauseum Justin Simmons until the minute he signed in Atlanta, when they had already signed CJ. That door was closed the minute they signed CJ, because they weren't looking to replace Reed. And they probably should have went with somebody like Justin Simmons or somebody of that nature on a 1-year deal, whatever he got. He didn't get that much.
Yeah,
but
would have been a better move. I mean,
but there's complications. There's complication. There's a lot of talk in Denver that they didn't get along. The assumption is, because you have a history with a particular coach is, he'll want that guy. Well, sometimes it's the opposite. Because you have a history, you don't want to be together again. In the case of that, I don't know that's true or not. I'm just saying I heard that a lot from people in Denver. but I would have went in a different direction. So there's not a lot of meaningful. And then, one of the short-term moves has worked, at least to a acceptable degree, in Zach Bond. We'll see if it works long term.
Yeah, and I think a lot of this, though, John. I mean, you point out the offensive signings being, good. I think that's where, I mean, we just talked about in the beginning. The agita is bigger on the defensive side for most of Eagles fans. It seems like the misses mostly come on the defensive side. Now, there's outliers. Zach Bond, has obviously been good, but the big signings and even the big draft picks are a large part of the reason that this defense is very underwhelming. Now, you can put some of it on the scheme as well, but I mean, you're talking about Nolan Smith, Jalen Carter, who's, I think, fine, Jordan Davis, Nakobe Dean, Milton Williams, just going back the last couple of years in the draft picks, not all of them are panning out. And I think that's part, added into the defensive evaluation for Howie that isn't as good. I mean, the defense is struggling. He's struggling to put a good defense together much more than, offense. And he let a lot of people walk after that 22 year on that defensive side. And many of us expected the replacement plan was going to be viable. It hasn't really been to that point. This defense has not been as good, or really even close to that 22 team.
No, they haven't, and that wasn't good enough. And again, sometimes I think, boy, I talked about it last year when everybody's trying to figure out, and I don't think anybody's figured out what happened last year with the collapse. And I think it was a literal collapse under the expectations. That's just my own perception.
Yeah.
But now you have the same, the expectations in this town have gotten to, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. When you have great teams like Kansas City, the expectation every year is to go to the Super Bowl. That's not necessarily a bad thing. But that's where the Eagles are, and probably undeservedly.
Well,
like I think
that was self-inflicted, John.
Well, sure.
Remember, they won the Super Bowl. This is the gold standard, and
Well, yeah, sure, a lot of it is, but from the standpoint of, you're not going to find many organizations who downplay their talent. That's just not what you do.
It's not smart
what
business.
You should do.
Yeah,
it's not smart. So part of that is understandable. But I think a large portion of fans think this team is so much better than everybody else. It's just not the case. But for the most part, do they have more talent than most of the league offensively? Yeah. Yes, they do. Unquestionably. Do they have more depth though? No. You can make a strong argument they're lower half of the league when it comes to depth.
Well, and that's where I feel like that Jahan Dotson trade should come into the bullseye. I mean, that's a miss. That's a big miss.
It's a miss after 4 weeks now.
Yeah.
He's been here
John,
for a very short period of time.
Why did we get Jahan Dotson? So he could play next to AJ and Devontae, or so that he could play when those dudes were missing? Well, I'm hoping that AJ and Devontae don't miss any more time after the bye week. So,
both. But I'm saying he just got here. Now, maybe after an entire training camp. But hey, I warned people the day of the trade. Look, Adam Peters is a smart guy. He was schooled well in a smart organization, and he traded the guy in the division. And nobody else was offering a 3rd round pick for Jahan Dotson at this stage. So I said, that's a warning sign. Nobody knows the player better than they do. And I think the assumption is, well, Washington's stupid because for years they've been stupid. Well, they're no longer stupid.
No, Adam Peters is a smart
dude. With Daniel Snyder, so you have to understand what's going on from the other side as well. But it hasn't been successful in a very small sample size. But I tell you what, at least there's some upside from a talent perspective. And maybe if it clicks down the road, you have something and you have some depth. You had nothing. I mean, one of those 1-year signings that didn't work out was Devontae Parker, who evidently was far more important to this team's plans than anybody realized.
Devontae Parker be on pace for a career year if he stuck around.
Yeah, he probably would have. And he would have made things better, at least as a legitimate NFL receiver, as a backup on the outside. But didn't work. He retired. And they had to go in a different direction. And they probably waited too long, to be honest. They probably should have done something else instead of saying, all right, let's take a look at the young guys. Because I think the hope is, you remember going back to the draft in the 5th, 6th round picks and the day 3 picks. Oh, what if Anaya Smith does this? What if Johnny Wilson does that? You can't count on that in the NFL. You cross your fingers and hope for Puka Nacua is a 5th round pick, and it happens. I'm not saying it doesn't happen.
Yeah, it's a needle in a haystack, though. It's not a
exactly. It's not indication of a consistent process that's going to happen elsewhere. And by the way, if Puka Nacua was here, you wouldn't even know who he was, because he's certainly not beating out AJ and Devontae. He's certainly not getting any traffic as the 3rd receiver on this team. And, you also have a high volume thrower. So again, I think I talk about this all the time. Everybody thinks everything's in a vacuum in this league. Way too many people. And that, Puka Nacua did this here, he's going to do this here. Number one, you need an opportunity. So you need a role player to be the 3rd receiver on the Philadelphia Eagles. You need a utility man in baseball. Some guys, that's my comparison. In old school baseball, not new school baseball. You'd have utility guys who played once a week. Some people could do it, but if you needed consistent at bats, you were a disaster. And some people can't do it. Some people can't play that role, even if they have the talent to do it. And that's why I say you wouldn't even know who he was if he was here. You need that opportunity first and foremost. But right now, the depth at that particular position is not good enough, and that explains some of the offensive worries. Defensively, and the problem is, I was thinking about I'm going to write about the personnel changes the Eagles can make during the bye, or should make during the bye. There's not a lot you can do. There's nothing on offense. Nothing, literally nothing. Because you're so entrenched. And when guys get healthy, you'll be fine. And then it becomes, we're going to be nitpicking over style points from week to week and how the quarterback plays. And if they turned it over, that's what you're going to be talking about. There's nothing to do. Nothing. Defensively, there's not much. You can make the move to Cooper in the slot.
At this point, there's nothing you can do. But the contingency plan coming out of that is really where the failure, I think lies on the defensive side. I mean, if you look at the 22 roster, right, and you look at TJ Edwards and Kaiser White gone, Marcus Epps gone, Javon Hargrave gone, Fletcher Cox, he retired, so there's no knock on that. Those are really the big losses. But if you look at the replacement plans for each of those guys, the replacement plan, I guess, for TJ Edwards was Nakobe Dean. I don't think he's ever going to sniff the kind of linebacker that TJ was that year. Kaiser White, he was a good second linebacker that year for us. I mean, I think we underrated him. Now that you see what we've lived with life after him, Marcus Epps they let walk, and they've struggled to fix that position. Well, Reed's been good, but C.J. Gardner-Johnson and Marcus Epps were the 2 safeties that year. They went back to the C.J. Gardner-Johnson well. Last year, they struggled by getting Kevin Byard, and they had a revolving door there. So the replacement plan for the defense, John, just hasn't been good. And then the Javon Hargrave stuff, you were counting on your 2 first-round defensive tackles.
Well, you have to. I mean, I don't worry about Javon Hargrave at all, and not because he's hurt. He's a great guy and all that, but they made the right decision there.
No, but I'm just saying the expectation, that
one thing I talked about going back to
move on from guys and still be a Super Bowl contending defense. our defense has really been putrid for the better part of the last season and a half.
Well, I don't think many appreciate the specialness of that season.
Yeah, you're right. I mean,
and I talk about it all the time that even if Jonathan Gannon came back, and even if they brought back TJ Edwards and Kaiser White and Marcus Epps and they weren't going to be the same. You weren't going to have that same season. So many guys had career years at the same time. That's like lightning striking.
Yeah.
And you generally don't go from career year to another career year. Some people do,
No,
but most people don't. And you're not getting 70 sacks again, right up the top of the bat.
I think Jonathan Gannon deserves some more credit for that than he gets in this city.
Well, of course.
I mean, especially now that, hindsight's always 20/20, but look at what, this scheme.
Well, that's what I'm saying. There's no appreciation for the historic nature of the defense. Even now, I mean, they didn't like the guy's personality, which is ironic because I said if you met him for 5 minutes, he'd win you over in 2 minutes.
Yeah. He didn't bother me at all.
But, he had some obviously awkward issues and doing certain things, but, he's also very young as a defensive coordinator.
Yeah.
And the same scheme issues you're having now, the soft coverage and all that stuff, which people just don't like. And I think they manifested that I don't like the scheme and I don't like this guy, or this guy's doing a bad job with this scheme. I'm with him with the scheme. I don't like the scheme. I say it all the time, but he did a good job with that particular scheme as well as you can do. And you're seeing that scheme, and you've seen that scheme now for 4 years. It's annoying, but it's even more annoying when you don't play it well. At least when you play it well, like tackle on the back end, things get a little bit better. But 70 sacks, I mean, people just don't understand. That's not normal. That's not normal. And to assume that was historic. And that was a lot of the reason for the success.
Yeah. Well, we'll see if they can get back. At what point, John, would you say it's fair, though, to, criticize Howie for some of... Now it's early.
They criticize away with Howie. First of all, he's been doing it for a long time. He's used to it. Plenty of mistakes to criticize. He is a human being. He's still a top 5 GM. It's not going to change. But yeah, he's a big boy. He can take it. And he's fair game. Everybody's fair game. And look, I'm sure he would like some things to be changed, and that's going to be one of the most interesting. The Eagles have to try to get Bryce Huff right because of the contract they gave him.
Yeah,
that's going
to be the
that's the reality of the NFL. And Howie's going to have to go into Bick's office at some point, maybe he already has, and say, look, I mean, we got to get this guy on the right path. And if that means wide 9, just use him, just let him go, just effing do it. I don't care if he's a 3-down
I think
player.
The draft picks are in that room too for me. I mean, Jordan Davis, he's technically, with the way the Eagles do business, John, he's technically in a contract year right now because Howie doesn't like to pick up the 5th-year option. It gives you no cap relief. He normally likes to work in the contract or the extension around that, like similar to like you did with Devontae Smith. This would be the year you would extend him after this season. Is Jordan Davis going to get extended?
Right now, I would say no. Long way. There's still, I believe, 13 games to go.
Yeah,
but, right now,
it's early. I'm just as
right
we go
now,
into the bye week,
I would say,
I'm trying to ask some of the questions that I think are on many's mind as you enter the bye week of,
if it continues at this pace, no. But there's going to be so many changes if it continues at this pace. First of all, Nick's out, Kellen's out, Vick's out. You got an entirely new system, entirely new coach. It's probably finally.
There is zero chance, just to clarify, there is zero chance in your mind that if all of that happened, and Nick was out, Kellen was out, Vic was out, there is zero chance in your mind, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, that Howie would be out as well.
No, zero. Yeah, zero. Howie's still at zero. Unless the only I don't want to take a dark turn, but Jeffrey's not the youngest guy in the world, and we're all mortal.
Right.
And if there's some health problems and Julian takes over, that's the only way. Howie.
Does Julian does he get along with Howie? And can you?
Oh, I'm not trying to say he doesn't get along with Howie, but he's his own person, and I assume this is not. Yeah, I'm not saying he doesn't get along with. My assumption is he'll want his own people.
Right.
That tends to be that tends to be how the NFL works. And that's why I say a lot of people say, well, you can elevate Kellen Moore. You can elevate. You're not. If you're firing Nick, you're not elevating the offensive coordinator in the year you're firing the head coach. Or Vic, because the organization likes him so much, you could force him on the next. Well, then you're, in theory, I wouldn't put that at 0%, but you're forcing a defensive coordinator on another head coach.
Yeah, no, that's not going to happen. I don't know. Maybe it would. This they like the. Why do you think Howie's at 0? You think that's warranted to be at 0?
Say what, Howie?
Yeah.
Yes, 0. How are you getting better? I mean, he in his worst years, he's top 5. In his best years, he's battling for 1 or 2. Why do you want to move up?
I will say he does struggle with the talent evaluation on the defensive side, seemingly.
I think, nobody has a bigger personnel staff than the Eagles. I'd have to check every every organization, but I know I would always joke, poor Duke Tobin in Cincinnati. I'll try to pull it up and see how deep it is, but he's got like 3 scouts in Duke Tobin. He does it all himself because they're so cheap. And this is a testament to Jeffrey Lurie as well. The Eagles football operations department is huge, and that includes obviously the scouting department, includes some other stuff as well, but they are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18 deep in the scouting department. And that doesn't even include Howie and the assistant GMs and Bryce Johnston and Adam Berry and all these people that people don't know. In years past, Jake Rosenberg.
A lot of cooks in the kitchen.
People like Patrick Dolan and Jeff Scott, even people who you would know, like Connor Barwin and Matt Leo, is part of the organization now. It's not like Howie's just going, oh, I like this guy. I like that.
But the buck stops with him, John. That's part of being the leader. That's part of being the top guy. You can put on all those.
Of course, I'm not saying the buck doesn't stop with him, but I think people don't realize, like, there's a bunch of good football minds who put this stuff together, and then he makes the final decision. So when you say, oh, he's not good with personnel, you're saying like 40 guys aren't good with personnel. Do they make mistakes? Everybody makes mistakes.
Yeah, that's part of NFL evaluation. You got to be fair with that.
I mean, I would take the Eagles just from the sheer money they put into it. Certainly top 5, and that's part of Howie's success, by the way, on as well. Again, Duke Tobin's got to do it all himself. Howie's he's got assistant GMs. He's always got assistant GMs. Dave Caldwell's in this organization. Matt Russell's in this organization. In the past, Andrew Berry came here before he went back to Cleveland. Now his brother's here, Adam Berry. He's got more people at his disposal than any other organization in the NFL. So to say he's bad at personnel, well, you got a bunch of bad people at personnel. Sometimes it's not a perfect. If it were easy, and you could go on,
I'm
and
not
read
saying it's easy.
Dane Brugler and say, well, this guy, and
that defense is underwhelming though, John. You talk about good player. I mean, Jalen Carter and who else? Bunch of dudes right now, man. It's a bunch of dudes on defense.
Well, the defense is not good right now.
No.
And part of it is scheme. Part of it is certainly, I would say, more of it is the talent, but not using the talent properly, I think, is part of it because of that scheme. Everybody's happy with Quignon to this point.
Yeah, Quignon looks
and they
good.
should be.
Yeah.
Not saying they shouldn't be. Jalen Carter, I think everybody sees the talent. But yeah, I mean,
I wonder if Big Dom was wrong about Jalen Carter, though.
Pick a team. Jalen Carter's fine.
I'm not worried about the football stuff. I'm worried about,
No, but even
the
I don't want to dismiss what happened because it was.
I'm not even talking. I'm more talking about the overall concerns of across just say it's a 10-year career right here in Philly. Will he ever get to the point where he is the professional, consistent player that you need to rely on when you're building a defense around somebody? Some of the problems continue to exist. I think that's a real fear because, sometimes when people show you who they are, you got to believe them,
Well, I don't think people get to see now, is he immature? Yes. Will he ever mature? I have no idea. I don't know how I know people my age who are immature. So
that's for sure.
I have no idea. But he's not a bad person. He is
I'm not saying he's a bad person.
I think a lot of people think that. I think a lot of people think that he is, and I don't say that about everybody in the Eagles locker room.
No,
I won't tell you,
but
he is not a bad person, and he tries to do the right thing. I think he's immature, but he's hardly the first 23-year-old who's immature. I think he'll get it, but I don't know if he'll get it.
Yeah, Jalen, he's never struck me as a seemingly like a bad person. And I think there's a couple dudes that maybe look like that from the outside. I don't know these guys, so I would never call them a good or bad person. I'm analyzing them, their part on the football team. Like if I looked at CJ Gardner-Johnson, I could see the explanation from somebody saying he's a bad dude. I mean, he messes with people. I'm not saying he is or not. I don't know the dude. I'm just saying Jalen Carter has never came across from afar like that at all.
Well, I'm not. There are certain guys. BG is obviously.
Yeah, I know BG. I've met BG personally many times.
Almost too good to be true. BG.
Yeah, he is.
No, great person. I will tell you I'm not going to say that about everybody. And the vast majority of are flawed. I'm not going to tell you I'm a good person. Everybody's flawed. But there are certain guys I can tell you that's a good person. Brandon Graham would lead that list. And that is a very high bar. And with Jalen Carter, I'm just telling you, I'm not putting him at that bar. But he is misunderstood because of mistakes he made. And he's got to stop making mistakes. But he is in earnest and he tries. And that to me is half the battle. I don't know if he's going to win the battle, but that to me is half the battle.
Yeah, I think just with him, I mean, you want to see consistency. Like I said, you're trying to build a defense around that guy, and Fletcher Cox obviously is a Hall of Fame level Eagle. He showed up. He showed up every week, John. People have their problems with Fletcher Cox. He showed up every week. So, and I thought,
and you don't even need to be a good person to be a good NFL player.
Oh yeah,
I mean,
what does being a good person get? I mean, look, it's great. I'm happy to hear he's a good dude, but it doesn't get us anything.
A lot of people will tell you, you need a couple bad guys to set the tone.
Yeah, I think we could use more of them. I think we could use more of them.
And that's the case. Somebody wrote that about Jalen Carter when he was. I think it was Sheil Kapadia. or he said it on his podcast. It was like, embrace that when he acting like a lunatic at the end of the Saints game when he played so well. Maybe there's something to it. Or embrace that side of him. But yeah, it's tough. Just from the standpoint, I was just speaking of the people who think he's a bad guy. I don't get that at all. I don't get it at all. But I could be wrong as well. It's not like I'm spending a lot of time with a 23-year-old, but I can tell you how he accounts for himself, and it's a positive. But he's got to be more consistent as a football player. I think we spend way too much time too talking, as talking about, but people are interested in it. I get why, talking about culture and and this and both and leadership and both. You've never had a better group of leaders than you had with the core four. And that was the greatest collapse in Eagles history, or one of the greatest collapses, if you want to call it the great. And you're never going to get better leadership than that.
You also had a team though in 22 that, rode that core four all the way to the Super Bowl. I mean, they were a big part of obviously the Super Bowl team in 2017.
Well, they were a big part because they were good. You know why? Because they were good players. And that makes it's great to have good players who are also leaders.
I'm not going to fault them for the collapse. I get it. I get what you're saying, but
no, I'm not faulting them for the collapse. I'm saying
no, you're just saying that culture's overblown.
Yes. I'm saying leadership, and that he's got to do this, he's got to do that. I'm culture. You got to have a good culture, and the fact you got to get along, and that's a more encompassing thing to me than leadership, which I think is way overblown. And not to say, you don't need it, but give me, as I said yesterday, give me. You can have the three leaders. Give me AJ, Devontae, and Lane, and I'll go play. And they're good leaders too, but I don't care about that part of it. Why do I want to play with them? Because they're better than your three. That's why.
I hear you. Sometimes that's not enough in the NFL, but I do understand what you're saying, and I do wonder about the culture aspect. I disagree with you a little bit on it, just in terms of I do think it matters when you got grown men in the locker room, and it's hard to motivate. You don't motivate grown men. Grown men have to want it.
They motivate themselves. That's the point.
I know, and that's where
you either do or you don't.
Exactly. So, we'll get to our commercial. But I thought that was a pretty good segment there on Howie Roseman. And some of the moves that he's made, where this football team is from him perspective. Johnny Mac says it, 0% chance Howie is on the out. So for any of the crazy fans out there who want Howie gone, I don't think he's going to be gone. I know I don't think you're crazy. I think, everybody starts to question everybody.
They are crazy. If you want Howie Roseman gone, again, when everybody says this stuff, think about what's your back end? Who do you want? How are you getting better?
You know what the city wants? I'll tell you what the city wants. The city wants a football guy, John. I'm just saying that you asked me. That's the answer. The thought of Bill Belichick right now controlling everything sounds very good to a lot of people.
He's 70.
I know, but think about the setup. You talk about this setup all the time. Isn't the front office a part of that setup?
It is. And by the way, I'm starting to think Bill is 72 years old.
Yeah, he's old. I'm just saying the idea of somebody that has more control, that's a football guy, is the polar opposite.
I think even Bill Belichick at this stage knows he doesn't want the whole enchilada.
I think he's enjoying his media life right now. He
wants to coach because he wants to break the record, but I think he knows and understands now that he's got to scale it back, and that's one of the reasons why people have connected him with the Eagles, because you're going to have a strong GM and in theory a strong coach. I think he's already come, and he was going to do it in Atlanta. he was going to work with, he wasn't going to be the GM in Atlanta. He had already made that decision. I think he's to that point where he realized that's too big of a job now to do both. And I think even if he does come in, it would be with Howie as the general manager.
I do too. I think maybe Bill could help him with some defensive personnel picking. Howie can work.
Oh, he should definitely listen.
I like that. That sounds like a good combination to me.
Yeah, I mean, and that's a misconception about Howie. It's not like he specifically. In fact, one of the things he has regrets about is at times listening too much to the coaching staff and what they wanted versus just getting the good player,
right?
Mainly in the draft, but he has some regrets about that. But he always listens to what the coaching staff wants and desires and tries to fit things around that. And I know people say, "What will Bryce Huff?" Well, yeah, they made a mistake.
Yeah,
Evidently.
The more I'm sitting here thinking about the tandem of Howie on contracts and everything like that, and Bill Belichick. Oh, baby, that sounds good, Johnny Mac. That sounds good.
Very, very, very short shelf life. Generally not the way Jeffrey Lurie has done business, but Jeffrey's 73, so maybe he's once.
No, they like guys they can control, don't they? I mean, look, that's
another thing. He's not Nick Sirianni as a first year coach. He's not Doug Peterson as a first time coach. He comes in with some don't question Bill Belichick vibes.
Well, I mean, shit. Can you blame him? What's he got? 6 Super Bowl rings? I mean, come on.
No, I don't blame him at all. I don't. It's not typically the way Jeffrey Lurie's done business, but he is a big Boston guy. Evident for those who don't know.
Yeah.
He does respect the Patriots organization a lot.
He wishes he owned the Patriots. Don't kid us, Johnny Mac. He tried to buy them.
He tried to buy the Patriots. Yeah. I've never kidded anybody. He was a Patriots fan growing up. That was the team he wanted to buy. It's not easy to buy an NFL team even back then. He certainly loves the Eagles now. It's his team, his organization. He's built it. But yeah, I don't necessarily think it's the easy bit. But maybe him aging has opened his minds up to say, I got to get another one quickly. So maybe he's willing to go with more of a short shelf life. And by the way, it ends up being a short shelf life anyway, because they always sour on these coaches. So
yeah, I mean, what
does it matter? They're always looking for that. Oh, we need Andy Reid. We need somebody here for 13 years, whatever.
Well, that comes down on the other, John. I mean, we had a Super Bowl coach here in Philadelphia that had a short shelf life.
Well, yeah, we had 2 because evidently Nick's on his way out as well. Because I don't think this is salvageable. I don't.
I'm going to put you on the spot. The month is January of 2025, so coming up at the end of the season. Is Nick Sirianni the head coach of the Philadelphia Eagles?
Odds are no. The only way, I are they going to go to the NFC Championship game? I don't think so.
If they go there, I can assure you.
I would say if they miss the playoffs, he's out 100%. If they're one and done in the playoffs, he's out 98%. If they win a game, then you start getting into how far do you have to go. If you get to the NFC Championship game, it's going to be tough to move on. That is the end game. If he gets there, it's going to be tough to move on. Do I think they're getting there? No, not right now. So, and part of the reason why is because of this setup. I mean, I've said it from day one. I don't like it. You've seen it. You've already seen it through 4 weeks. One hiccup of adversity where it's basically injury driven. And I got so many people in my inbox every day about this guy is the worst coach in the history of the world. And
well, like you said, he's become the lightning rod. I mean, he's become the lightning rod. I think even too. I'm not a big Nick guy. I mean, I've never liked his style as a head coach, but I've also respected the success the team has had with him. But as you point out, he's become the lightning rod. And many of it is because people don't want to blame other people or people don't want to criticize the player, the quarterback, or, and it's easy to put everything on Nick. Like my latest question, and we got to get to a break. I don't want to get too deep into this. Maybe we can do it after the break. My latest question is, all the people who are saying this is Sirianni's offense, still with a splash of Kellen Moore. And I'm, is it, or is it just the quarterback? And this is, where we are. That's my latest thing where I'm like, I don't know, because
it's not Nick's offense. It's not Nick's offense.
It does look similar though, John. And I'm not saying it's Nick's. My question is this what you're limited to run with Jalen at the helm, who's not built to run a quarterback or a style like Kellen Moore ran in the past?
Yes.
Because I think that's why people are saying
you're closer to the correct answer there. Now, this week was an outlier. Like I said, Seth Walder does a great job, puts out these motion stats every once in a while. I don't believe anybody else does them. So everybody goes to Seth. If they do, somebody can. I don't think anybody else does. But he doesn't do them every week. And again, we're still in the small sample size. And right now, the Eagles are 19th in the NFL. And everybody lost their mind because typically Kellen Moore's in the top 10. So it became, well, Kellen Moore's, again, everything's a vacuum. Everything's a vacuum. First of all, where were they week 3 versus week 4? Because instead of AJ, Devontae, and Britton Covey, the guys who were doing the motion, I know they were top 10 week 1 because that's the last time Seth did them. He only did them week 1, then he did them after week 4. They were top 10 week 1. Week after the week 4 game, they were 19th. Now, I don't know. I could chart it myself. Maybe I'll ask Damo if he charted it. I'm pretty sure the motion was drastically scaled back. And again, common sense. Paris Campbell, Johnny Wilson,
right?
John Ross, who wasn't even on the team the week prior. What do you think? They're running around doing the same stuff that AJ's doing and Devontae's doing and Britton Covey's doing? Some of this stuff is just common sense. But even if you want to default to, it's still Nick's. Well, Nick's bottom 5, and he was 32nd. So even 19th is much more motion than they used under Nick Sirianni. And Nick Sirianni's lack of use of motion has to do with the quarterback. So what you're getting is a in between what Kellen Moore wants to do, what Nick Sirianni felt he had to do.
And he's using it because it part of it was successful with Jalen. I think people miss that as well.
Oh my God, it was the most successful run in Eagles history.
Like, it looks like Nick. I'm like, well, Nick had Jalen playing well at one point.
Oh, believe me,
if he took some of it, it wouldn't surprise me.
Believe me, Nick. That's you talk about Slay. That's a sore spot with Nick. That is the greatest offense in Eagles history, and he's not wrong.
Well, I think that would be, the human element side of that to me makes a lot of sense. I mean, it's easy for him. It's easy for us to point to Nick about everything, but yeah, he did concoct one of the best Eagles offenses we've had.
Not one of.
Many will it was Shane Steichen, and not one of. Right, it was. And now everybody acts like the dude can't sniff a jock strap. I think that's a. If I were Nick, that would piss me the fuck off for sure.
Oh, it does. And yeah, I mean, but the criticism are valid. You have to adjust when teams do adjust, and you have to keep evolving. And it seems like Jalen has stagnated a little bit, but and maybe I'll email Seth and say, where were the Eagles after week 3 with motion? Because I have a feeling it can cut. And remember, so the difference between, so they're 19th, right? The difference between the team ahead of them is they're 22.4% at snap motion. The Jets are 22.6%. Houston's 22.7%. Indianapolis 23.4%. Giants 23.7%. So you got this group in a cluster. One game can have a giant effect with a small sample size, right, to where, again, they could be, Minnesota's right outside the top 10 at 29.4. Ain't that big of a difference, people. One game.
The common denominator is Jalen. How many coordinators are you going to run through where you blame, everybody but the
guy? Well, there's certain people that are going to always blame the coaches. And there are others who, believe Jalen can't do anything right. And,
Well, I'll tell you this, John, because, I know it bothers you when people say it's Nick's offense, but your man, Nick Sirianni, brought this on himself. Those comments he made were so stupid. He made this happen. Everybody was told, oh, it's going to be Kellen Cole. He opened up this can of worms a couple of weeks ago.
Well, and I said that day, I said, oh,
I know you
boy.
did. You
oh,
did
boy. Oh, boy. Don't say that. Because,
he said it.
Look,
he said it, John.
I think people don't understand. When you game plan, like every single major assistant is involved with the game plan. Jeff Stoutland's involved with the running game. Somebody's in charge. Doug used to tell you, well, he would tell us who's in charge of each portion. 2 minute. Hurry up. For 1 year it was Press Taylor, 1 year it was Rich Scangarella, the Scangarella year. Everybody is responsible for a small portion of the game plan. Aaron Moorhead, Jamal Singleton, right, Jason Michael, Kevin Petula, every single one of them is involved with part of the game plan. Then it filters up to Kellen Moore, who makes the final decision and puts together the game plan. That used to be Nick's job. Nick, as a head coach, then can at any point take over for any reason at any time, which he should not tell people, and he did. But it's harder to explain that than to just say, "All right, stop." He calls the plays. No, and he said it with Brian Johnson. Never took over the plays. Now he said it with Shane Steichen. Never took over the plays. Now he says, yeah, occasionally I would take over. Shouldn't have said it. I'm with you. But, should people be able to understand that? Yes. Will they? No. 95% of the play calling is Kellen Moore, probably more. So if that's not his offense, that's not his offense.
Yeah. Well, maybe off the record, say something to Nick and say, you opened up a fucking can of worms. He knows that. I'm sure he knows that. But
everybody knows that.
Yeah. I'm starting to wonder whether Nick is like, at some point, Nick's going to protect himself. You talked about him being upset about the way people are.
Well, that's one of the, admirable traits. He will protect people, and he's done it many times. And he did it most notably with AJ and made himself look like a fool in Jalen Hurts in the Seattle game. That's the best example. I think a lot of people, Andy's the same way, right? People don't like it. I got to do a better job. I got to do a better job. Well, I should say they think they don't like it. They would like it even less if they went up and told the truth and say, yeah, this guy shit the bed. This guy's terrible. This guy. They'd like it even less. So it's kind of you can't win type of scenario.
Let's get to our commercial break, Johnny Mac. Good first hour here on Birds 365. We have Les Bowen coming up in about 20 minutes. Before I do that, let's hit our real quick. Our super chat. Abe, thank you, brother. Appreciate your support as always. Abe says, Devin White was practicing with the first team defense during training camp, and Dean being the starter on game day. Is Howie elevating Dean value to try and trade him?
Well, he ain't elevating his value, but no, no, they're not trying to trade. Are they trying to trade
Dean or Devin? That's my
Dean or
question.
Devin? They would love to trade Devin White. I don't know why anybody would trade for him. No, they're not trying to trade Nakobe Dean. They wanted him to win the job. They didn't want him to hand the job. The plan was always for Nakobe Dean to be the starting, or the hope, I would say, was for him to win the starting middle linebacker job. And he did. He played tremendous down the stretch of training camp. He has not played tremendous in the regular season. So, no, they're not trying to trade Nakobe Dean, if that's the question. Yes, they want to trade Devin White, if that's the question. And there's a group.
Nobody's trading anything for Devin White.
No,
maybe a bag of peanuts.
And the same thing with James Bradbury, and the same thing with Ainias Smith.
Wait, Ainias Smith is
no. Well, no. In the case of Ainias Smith, no, he just doesn't want to admit.
I think I might have forgotten Ainias Smith existed.
He didn't want to cut him. There's no injury there. I'm going to be blunt. There's no injury there. Ainias Smith talked to me after the final preseason game. It was completely fine. You don't want to admit a mistake, and you're holding on to guys. In the case of Ainias, it's like, that's probably a young player, and he deserved to get cut. I'm not trying to say, he's getting paid. There's not that, but at his age, he'd probably like a second chance to try to catch on somewhere else. And for whatever reason, he doesn't want to admit a mistake. And we all know about Bradbury. We all know about Devin White. I mean, why are they here? I can't say. I haven't talked to James. James is because he's been hurt, obviously. But James is and he's a professional, so he's not going to give up any secrets. But he's a stand-up guy, and maybe he's legitimately hurt, but it is a coincidence. I'll say that. With Devin, yeah. I mean, people talk themselves into something with Devin. I tried to hit.
You did.
I tried.
You did. You told us all summer. I'll give you credit. You did.
And it's not, all you got to do is anybody can get the tape, put on the Tampa Bay tape. He's not a good player. Great guy. Struggling.
I'll give him some credit for the way he handled, everything this year.
He's handled things tremendously.
Yeah, I thought he did. I thought that was.
He's handled things better than the Eagles. I'll tell you that, because Vic evidently doesn't speak to him. And they're just holding him hostage because they don't want to. I don't know.
Yeah, that's got to be annoying.
He's not part of the plans. I would say, I said this pretty early in the camp. Ben Van Sumeren and Jeremiah Trotter Jr., at some point, if Nakobe Dean continues to play the way he's playing, and people say, well, why not put Devin? Forget about Devin White. It ain't happening.
Go to Trotter.
I don't know what's going on behind the scenes. We don't get to see practice anymore. But if those guys are developing behind the scenes, at some point, we got to think about it. That's a big if they're developing behind the scenes.
Well, a lot of fans are there on Jalix Hunt. I know you're like, well, I can assure you he's not ready. You're replacing a dude that has 0-0-0-0.
Jalix Hunt, it's a little more obvious because he just needs to get bigger and stronger. And
but I think the problem with him is the guy in front of him has zeros on the board. So it's like he could suck, and he still replaces the guy successfully. He could be the worst edge rusher in the league, and it's still a viable replacement for Bryce Huff.
I don't think that's the case, but
I'm just saying. Bryce Huff got a nothing burger, John.
Yeah, but again. Stop. I'm going to we got to start doing clips we got to get Kelsey up there in this nerd talk about statistics. Because it's phenomenal.
Yeah, but Bryce Huff has been bad, even on the tape. I mean, come on.
No, but he hasn't been the worst edge defender in football, is what I'm saying. He hasn't. People think he is, but he hasn't.
Fourth to the last, fifth to the last, somewhere down there.
No, he's not even close to the last. That's what I'm saying. Who's last? Former Eagle. This is just PFF, but former Eagle Janarius Robinson. He's last. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6,
Does
7,
Janarius want to
8,
come back?
9,
Janarius,
10,
come on back, brother. I got a spot for you. We need some
11,
edge.
12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 24 worse than Bryce Huff right now.
What's the total amount though?
111.
Okay, so he's like
ain't good.
Late 80s.
Ain't good. But that's what I'm saying. There's a lot of hype.
No, but that's why people want Jalen Hunt, because they're like, can he be 25th from the last? I don't think he could. Able to be.
I don't think he could. Like, I don't think. I don't think he could.
John, it might be one of the biggest things that you were wrong about this offseason was Bryce Huff right now.
I'll take
the one I'm going to hold you to the fire on.
That's fine. I have no problem with it right now, but I do think there, because people look at the zeros, like you said, and that's why I bring up Kelsey. And like, for instance, it's interesting to me, I'm going to hold your feet to the fire. Last week was Johnny Wilson week, right?
Yeah. Oh God.
There's 122 receivers graded. He's 121. Like,
holy
just
mackerel.
like, I mean, but it's interesting.
Yeah, Johnny Wilson was a 6th-round pick. Like,
and by the way, no,
you're right. I drank the Kool-Aid on him for a week.
No, but by the way, you're not the only one. That's my point. There's certain players that's weird to me where they drink the Kool-Aid and it's like, oh, and I'm like,
I didn't even drink the Kool-Aid. I was trying to garner up some hope for the team without AJ and Devontae. And
I'm not just speaking of you. There are a bunch of people. It's like, well, Johnny Wilson can, and I'm like, no, we can't. That's kind of where I am with, and he's actually playing because of necessity. And you could argue he would need to play more, at least because of when AJ and Devontae are out. But it's strange to me. Bryce is a better football player, and I know it's hard to, and that's fine. You can point out that I thought he was gonna, and I'm not running from it.
I don't think
I thought the Eagles.
I don't think your thought process was flawed. I understand why you said you thought it was going to be the right move. Just hasn't worked out.
He's just a better football, and people are. I know nobody's going to believe this, but he's a better football player than Jalen Hunt right now. Significantly.
Yeah, that's not that hard to believe. I mean, John's right. I mean, the numbers were good on Bryce coming out of there. I get it, but boy, he has been very not even underwhelming.
No, he hasn't been productive. Yeah, I mean, he hasn't been productive. Now, part of that, I do blame part of that on the scheme. And it's like, if I were Howie, I'd be knocking on Big's door and saying, dude, all right, I know what you're trying to do. I appreciate it, but
Vic might open the door, give him a right hook, and say, "Give me some fucking players on defense. You're making me look like shit." That's what Vic might respond.
He might.
Giving me trash cans at linebacker.
You got to
have a good defense. Come on, man. I got a 40-year career on the line here.
Yeah, N'Kobe's an issue too, man. I'm disappointed there.
Yeah,
because I thought he was gonna.
I thought he started off okay though, John.
He
started off like not great. I'm not saying he was great, but he wasn't like terrible. Last week he was terrible.
N'Kobe, I'm looking up N'Kobe. 80 linebackers. He's number 76.
Holy moly. 76 of 80? I don't even care if you like PFF. That's a brutal rating.
Yeah, 76 of 80. And number 80, by the way, our old friend Kaiser White.
Ooh, I brought him up earlier. That's not a good look for that argument, huh?
I'm not having a good year. Sometimes it happens, but he played well here. That's all that matters. Not great, but he played okay.
N'Kobe. 76.
76.
Where's our buddy Zach Bowen?
I believe he's in the 40s.
That's about what I was going to. That's about what
40, 43, which is acceptable.
That's
but I guarantee. But you know what?
I was hoping N'Kobe Dean would be.
You know what? last year, both Zach Cunningham and Nick Morrow were higher than that.
Yeah, and that was putrid.
On which talks to, again, if people care, PFF is more about down to down consistency. And right now it's hard to argue that Zach Cunningham and Nick Morrow, who weren't good enough by any stretch of the imagination, were far more consistent, at least, than these two.
Oh gosh. Oh god. Now that I said that about Vic, I'm thinking Vic would throw the haymaker, so Howie will avoid the office because Vic is like, hey dude, hey, I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear it. Because I think Zach Bond might have been a Vic signing, actually. And Bryce Huff was more of the Howie.
There's no big signings. Stop that. There's
no, but isn't there some input on certain players? Like,
yes, but
yeah.
No.
I mean, did Howie Roseman just say, "Oh, look, there's Zach Bond"?
People say Jalen Hunt is a big pick. There's no big picks. There's no big signings. Yes, they take into account what he wants and what he needs and what he projects, but yeah, it doesn't work that way. Yeah.
Let's get to our. We'll wait 2 minutes now because we got Les Bowen coming up at 9:20. We went the whole hour and 10. Good first hour and 10. We missed a break, but that's all right. I'll have to chalk it up. Real quick, while I'm here, I'll tell you guys about BetUS real quick. Go to betus.com.pa, everybody. They're a big supporter of the channel, JAKIB Sports and Birds 365. So definitely go check them out for us. Use that promo code YouTube150, and you get 150% sign-up bonus on your first deposit, and then you get 125% on your second and third deposits, and it's all up to $2,000. So you can deposit less and bet with more. Take your Saquon prop bets if you're out on the Eagles right now. Take your under bets on their win totals. Take the fire, Nick, by the end of the year. Prop bet if it's on there. Take it all. It's all on BetUS. So go to betus.com.pa. That's betus.com.pa. Use that promo code YouTube150. And big thank you to BetUS for sponsoring Birds 365 here on JAKIB Sports. Johnny Mac, one more question here as before we get to Les Bowen. And we got a lot to talk about with Les Bowen. You think some of these problems that we've talked about here, and that's the bye week, that's kind of what you do. You analyze the good and the bad.
And and it's too early too. That's what sucks about the early bye week. Now it worked out for the
too early to analyze, especially when you miss your best player for 3 weeks.
Offensively, you can't analyze anything.
Well, you can analyze the quarterback's turnovers. You absolutely can analyze.
Yes, you're right.
That's not winning football, whether AJ's on the field or off it. That's a losing recipe.
There's always certain things you can.
Yeah.
Shouldn't have said that. But it's not a big enough sample size to talk about scheme and motion and that bullshit.
Yeah. And I will say, I mean, like, my question was going to be, are some of these problems in your eyes? You've been around the game for a long time. You've covered this team for a long time. You've been around sports for a long time, a lot longer than I have. Do some of these problems look too big to overcome in a season? And what I mean by that is, many had Super Bowl expectations for this team, whether they were right or wrong coming into the year. I think many of that has been shattered. When we talk about Jalen Hurts' turnovers, I'm like, well, he could effectively stop turning the ball over and that problem would be fixed. Some of the other problems, I don't think they can be fixed, like the defensive problems and some of the. Where are you on that? Do you think all this can be fixed? Or would you tell Eagles fans to hold out hope for this season? Or, I mean, you just kind of told me you think Nick's going to be gone. So maybe.
Well, I'm saying if you asked me today, what would I don't like the setup, and I don't think it's. And again, this is more of a Jeffrey Lurie issue than anybody else. You're set up. You're almost set up to fail because of the what's going on and the murkiness of the setup. And you've already seen it. People lose their minds. Oh, that's a Nick call. That's a Kellen call. That's this. That's that. Oh, he doesn't get to do what he wants to do. Oh, he does get to do what he wants to do on one game. Especially in a city like this, it's just you wouldn't bite at that. So it's sort of like when we criticized Jalen Hurts in the offseason when he failed to answer Martin's question with 6 weeks of a void between the end of minicamp and the start of training camp, and he was asked about Nick the first time, and he was like stumbling and bumbling, and everybody made a big deal out of it. Unforced error. That's the same thing with Jeffrey Lurie with this setup. Unforced error. And you're seeing it early in the season with a few little hiccups, and basically you shouldn't even be that concerned about the offensive hiccups because you've lost arguably your three best players. And that's self-correcting. Not even a problem. That's going to correct itself. And then we'll get back to the nitpicking. Oh, this game, this game, that. Saquon dropped the ball. Whose fault is that? That kind of nitpicking. That's what, because the group as a whole will be effective.
Right.
Defensively is a whole different story. It's about getting, you're not going to be top 5. You're not going to be 70 sacks. You're not going to be the number 1 pass defense in the NFL.
Like we were in 2020. Like that was our hope.
Yeah. Exactly. Can you get to 16, 17, 18? Yeah, you can get to 16, 17, 18. And who are you scared of in the NFC? I would personally be a little scared.
We might be the 3rd best team in the NFC East for crying out loud right now.
Yeah, but they're not though. I mean, they're not, because AJ's coming back and Devontae's coming back, and now if they were done for the season, I would agree with you. They're not. They're coming back after the bye. They're coming back.
I know. I'm worried about the quarterback on the offensive side. That's my biggest worry there.
But you fine,
need Jalen Hurts can be a star. You're not going to win with this defense. So,
well, you're going to win to a certain degree. You're going to win the NFC East most likely.
Yeah, maybe Washington. Defense, I mean, even look at Patrick Mahomes. Look at Tom Brady through his career. I mean, good quarterbacks still need a good defense. I mean, Patrick Mahomes. That defense, boy, has it helped him in the last 2 years get those 2 Super Bowls.
Well, you win different ways, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
no, that's true.
But it's nice when you have a quarterback who can make a play. Like even when you have a good defense, it's you generally need the quarterback to make a play once or twice a game, and Patrick's able to do that. Whether they're struggling offensively, no matter who they have, he's generally been able to do that. But yeah, last year Kansas City was more defensive tinted, I would say, in their run to the Super Bowl. And with the Eagles, they're going to have to be offense.
That's the latest laughing thing. I'm sorry, Eagle Nation. I love you all. But the one thing I got to laugh at that I keep getting all over, and I got it on social media, is people sharing this graphic to me that Mahomes has the same stats as Jalen Hurts. And I'm like, what? You think I care that Patrick Mahomes is the same stats as Jalen Hurts right now?
Jason Kelsey, nerds, stop it.
It's ridiculous.
Stop it, you nerds.
We got Les Bowen in the green room, and we haven't taken a break yet. So let's get to our commercial break. Appreciate everybody in the chat. Big crowd right now. Appreciate all of you guys. Hit that like button. We'll be right back in 3 minutes with Les Bowen, the great Les Bowen, joining us on Birds 365.
If you missed any of today's show on the JAKIB Media channel, listen to the podcast on your way home. Available on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify.